Many people look at a man standing alone and immediately start running the diagnostic software of social judgment. They look at the empty chair beside him and assume there must be a glitch in the system. They think that if you don't have a girlfriend, you might not be very attractive, or maybe you lack the guts to approach women. Or they might even whisper that you're hiding your true orientation. It's as if society can't compute the idea of a man being single by design rather than by disaster. We have been conditioned to believe that a man without a partner is a puzzle with a missing piece, a tragedy waiting for a resolution. But what if that empty chair isn't a sign of a problem, but a symbol of a choice? What if the silence in his life isn't a void, but a sanctuary where he is finally free to hear his own thoughts? We are taught from the moment we can process stories that the protagonist's journey always ends in a pair. Every movie, every song, and every cultural milestone is a signpost pointing toward the other. But what happens when a man looks at those signposts and decides to keep walking straight? The psychology of the man without a girlfriend isn't a monolith of loneliness. It is often a complex, high-resolution study in sovereignty. For many, being single is not a waiting room. It is the destination. It is a period of cognitive sovereignty where the most important conversation you have every day is the one you have with yourself. When you don't have a girlfriend, the mental bandwidth usually reserved for navigating the emotional weather of another person is suddenly reclaimed. It's like discovering a massive, unused room in your own house. You can fill it with anything: deep work, creative obsessions, or simply the luxury of a silence that hasn't been negotiated. There is a specific kind of freedom that comes with not being witnessed every day. When you live in a relationship, your identity is constantly being shaped by the presence of a partner. You are a boyfriend, a provider, a listener, a cohabitant. Your choices, from what you eat for dinner to how you spend your Tuesday nights, are filtered through the needs of the collective. But for the man in solitude, the filter is gone. This can be terrifying for some, but for the inverse mind, it is an opportunity for radical authenticity. You begin to discover which of your habits are truly yours and which were just performances designed to keep the peace. You find that your mental sandbox, that inner space where you play with ideas and explore the world, becomes significantly larger when it isn't being constantly encroached upon by the demands of intimacy. Of course, we have to talk about the singlehood paradox. Society looks at a man without a partner and assumes there must be a deficit. They look for the flaw. They rarely consider that he might simply be too honest with himself. There is a profound psychological integrity in refusing to enter a relationship just to fill a societal slot. Many men remain single because they have a high-resolution understanding of what a relationship actually costs. They see the wrong compromise as a price too high to pay. They would rather endure the occasional sting of a quiet Friday night than the soul-crushing weight of a relationship that requires them to diminish themselves to fit. They aren't avoiding love, they are protecting their autonomy. Think about the way our modern world operates. We are living in an era of dopamine burnout, where everything is designed to be loud, fast, and addictive. Dating apps have turned human connection into a slot machine, where you can swipe for hours and feel more alone than when you started. For the man who opts out of this cycle, there is a reclaimed sense of time. When you aren't chasing the next hit of validation, you can focus on building brain wealth. You can spend 4 hours on a hobby that has zero social capital. You can read that 800-page biography. You can sit in a park and just watch the trees. This isn't missing out. It is opting in to a different frequency of life. It is truly fascinating to see how many of you share your own journeys in the comments, and I want you to know that I read and sincerely appreciate every perspective you bring to this community. Your stories about choosing solitude or finding peace in your own company often offer more insight than any textbook could. At what point did we decide that aloneness was synonymous with loneliness? In reality, they are two completely different psychological continents. Loneliness is a hunger, a feeling of being excluded from the feast. Solitude, however, is the feast itself. It is the ability to be your own best company. For the man without a girlfriend, the journey is often about mastering the art of being enough. It's about realizing that a partner is a magnificent addition to a life, but they cannot be the foundation of it. If the foundation is shaky, the addition will only make it collapse faster. By staying single, many men are actually doing the heavy lifting of building a foundation that doesn't require someone else to hold it up. There is also the element of hyper-awareness. When you aren't distracted by the constant buzz of a relationship, you become more attuned to the world around you. You notice the shifts in your own moods, the patterns in your thinking, and the subtle ways society tries to manipulate your desires. You become a ghost in the machine, someone who is physically present, but psychologically unavailable to the standard marketing of happiness. This independence makes you dangerous to a consumerist culture that relies on your insecurity to sell you products. A man who is happy alone is a man who cannot be easily bought. But let's be real, solitude isn't always a sun-drenched walk in the park. There are moments of social reciprocity fatigue, where the lack of a consistent partner means you have to work harder to maintain your tribe. You don't have a default +1 for the wedding. You don't have someone to split the emotional labor of a bad day. This is the tax of the independent life. But for those who choose it, the tax is worth it, for the sheer intellectual and emotional sovereignty it buys. They understand that every relationship is a trade-off, and currently, the trade isn't in their favor. They are waiting for a connection that feels as high resolution as their own solitude. We also have to consider the information diet of the single man. When you aren't spending your evenings engaged in the shared consumption of media, watching the shows she wants to watch, scrolling through the feed she finds interesting, you become the sole curator of your own mind. You can go deep into topics that others find boring. You can develop a worldview that is entirely your own, uninfluenced by the civilized focal point of a domestic partner. This leads to a unique kind of wisdom, a rugged internal intelligence that can only be forged in the quiet. It is the inverse way of living, finding the most growth in the places most people are afraid to look. There is an old idea that all of humanity's problems stem from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. The man without a girlfriend is the one who has mastered that room. He has faced the silence, he has wrestled with the boredom, and he has come out the other side with a sense of peace that isn't dependent on a text message or a compliment. He has realized that the most intimate relationship he will ever have is the one he has with his own consciousness. As we look at the shifting landscape of the current year, we see more and more men choosing this path. It isn't a retreat from responsibility. It is an adult reclamation of self. It is a refusal to perform a role that no longer fits. It is the understanding that being alone is a physical state, but being sovereign is a mental one. You can be in a crowded room, in a relationship, or in a marriage, and still feel like a ghost. But the man who has conquered his own solitude is never truly a ghost. He is the most solid thing in the room. The stakes of this psychological shift are higher than they seem. When a man learns to be happy without a girlfriend, he changes the dating market entirely. He stops being a seeker and becomes a lighthouse. He no longer needs a relationship to feel valid, which means that if he does eventually choose one, it will be based on genuine connection rather than desperate necessity. He becomes a better friend, a better son, and a better human because his energy isn't being drained by a constant search for external completion. He is already complete. Think about the beauty of a day that belongs entirely to you. You wake up when your body tells you to. You work on your mission with an intensity that would be impossible if you had to balance it with someone else's schedule. You eat when you're hungry, sleep when you're tired, and think what you want to think. In this unoptimized, messy, and deeply human way of living, You find a rhythm that is purely your own. You are no longer a relationship zombie, going through the motions of intimacy because that's what the script says you should do. You are an author, writing a story that doesn't need a co-writer to be a masterpiece. We often talk about self-love as a soft, floral concept, but for the man in solitude, self-love is a discipline. It is the discipline of keeping your own promises. It is the discipline of maintaining your physical and mental health without an external guard to watch over you. It is the discipline of finding meaning in the work itself, rather than the praise the work brings. This is the hard-to-find personality. The man who is invisible to the masses because he isn't shouting for attention, but who is deeply resonant to those who take the time to look. The social pressure to partner up is a powerful force, acting like a gravity that pulls us toward the center of the curve. It's the civilized focal point we've discussed, that spot where everyone identifies the trend and tries to stay ahead of it. But the man without a girlfriend has stepped off the curve. He is no longer competing for the same rewards. He has realized that the game is rigged, and the only way to win is to play by his own rules. This isn't about being bitter. It's about being better. It's about recognizing that your value isn't a stock price that fluctuates based on someone else's interest. There is a profound freedom in being unvetted. We live in a world where we outsource our trust to digital footprints and social proof. We trust the man with the curated Instagram and the beautiful girlfriend because he has been verified by the system. But the man who is a digital ghost, the man who has no social proof of his romantic success, is the ultimate mystery. He requires you to actually look at him, to listen to him, and to judge him based on his character rather than his profile. In a world of filtered realities, he is the only thing that is raw. If you are that man, the one sitting at the wedding, the one walking through the park alone, the one with the empty passenger seat, know that your state is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of a very specific kind of courage. You are doing the work that most people are too afraid to do. You are learning who you are when no one is watching. You are building a world within yourself that is so rich and so vibrant that the absence of a partner feels less like a hole and more like a choice of negative space in a painting. There is a quiet power in being the only person who knows what you're thinking. When you aren't constantly discharging your thoughts into a relationship, they have time to ferment, to grow, and to become something substantial. You become a person of depth because you have spent time in the deep. You aren't just reacting to the surface-level waves of a partnership. You are exploring the currents of the ocean itself. This depth is what makes a man truly attractive, though perhaps not in the way the mainstream understands. It is an attraction based on gravity rather than flash. As we wrap this up, I want to come back to that aunt at the wedding table. The next time someone asks you why you're still single, you don't need to give them an explanation. You don't need to list your qualities or defend your choices. You can simply smile, knowing that you are living a life that is high resolution in a world that is increasingly blurry. You can walk back into your quiet house, close the door, and feel the immense, heavy, beautiful peace of a mind that belongs entirely to itself. Ultimately, the goal of life isn't to find someone who completes you. It's to realize that you were never incomplete to begin with. The presence of another person can be a wonderful light, but you are the sun, and a sun doesn't need a mirror to know that it is burning. It just burns. It stays sovereign, it stays mysterious, and it keeps lighting the way for those who are still wandering in the dark, looking for a version of themselves they haven't found yet. Stay sovereign, stay mysterious, and remember that the most important person you will ever date is the person staring back at you in the mirror every morning. Everything else is just a conversation. What is the one thing about your own company that you've grown to love so much that you'd be unwilling to trade it for a relationship? When you find that answer, you'll realize that being alone isn't a sentence, it's a liberation. It's the moment the music stops, the flowers fade, and you realize that the most beautiful dance in the room was the one you were doing all along, perfectly in sync with your own heartbeat. That is the inverse mind. That is the power of the man who stopped searching and finally started being.